Picture Wolfsburg on a gray Monday morning. 60,000 workers stream through the gates of the world's largest car factory, their footsteps echoing a rhythm that has powered European prosperity for generations. By sunset, another 4,000 Volkswagens will join the endless parade of German engineering heading to showrooms from Milan to Madrid. This single facility produces more vehicles annually than entire nations manage, a testament to the manufacturing miracle that made Germany synonymous with economic invincibility. Yet something fundamental has shifted. For the first time in its 87-year history, Volkswagen whispers about closing German factories. The nation that never stumbles faces its third consecutive year of economic contraction. Over 3 million Germans find themselves jobless, watching as the industrial heartland that employs 1 in 4 European factory workers begins to hollow out. Berlin's response defies everything Germany represents. The country that wrote fiscal responsibility into its constitution, that made balanced budgets a national religion, has torn up the rulebook. €500 billion, a sum equivalent to 15% of Germany's entire economy, will flood into infrastructure, green energy, and industrial rescue packages. This isn't policy adjustment, it's economic heresy from the priests of prudence. Understanding Germany's gamble requires grasping what made its economy unique among wealthy nations. While Britain pivoted to banking and America championed tech startups, Germany remained stubbornly industrial. Manufacturing comprises over a quarter of its economy, double the share in France or Britain. German factories don't just make things, they make the machines that make things, the chemicals that enable production, the precision instruments that define quality worldwide. This industrial obsession created an export colossus. Nearly half of everything Germany produces leaves its borders, a dependency 3 times greater than America's. The model worked brilliantly. Foreign cash poured in faster than Germans could spend it, creating massive trade surpluses exceeding $200 billion annually, more than any other nation on Earth. Tax coffers overflowed. Unemployment fell below 5%. The government could afford to be stingy with borrowing because exports kept the treasury flush. The 2009 debt brake law epitomized German confidence. This constitutional amendment capped government borrowing at just 0.35% of GDP annually, while Americans routinely borrow 5%, over 10 times Germany's self-imposed limit. The logic was seductive. By pledging fiscal discipline not just today but forever, Germany would earn the world's trust. Markets would reward this commitment with rock-bottom interest rates, making German businesses even more competitive. It wasn't just a budget rule, it was a bet that virtue would pay compound interest. For a decade, the bet paid off spectacularly. Between 2010 and 2019, Germany's GDP grew by almost 25%, outpacing most of Europe. The country had transformed fiscal discipline into competitive advantage. Interest rates plummeted as investors rewarded German prudence with cheap capital. Berlin had created a perpetual motion machine. Exports generated surpluses. Surpluses eliminated borrowing needs. Low borrowing enhanced credibility. Credibility reduced costs. Lower costs boosted exports. The formula seemed unbreakable, but it required one assumption that seemed safe until 2020, that global trade would keep flowing. COVID struck Germany's export-dependent economy like a precision-guided missile. Within months, trade revenues evaporated by $100 billion. Car production crashed 25%. The economy contracted 5%, its steepest decline since the rubble of 1945. For any nation, this would be catastrophic. For Germany, with its unique dependence on selling abroad, it was existential. But Germany barely had time to bandage these wounds before sustaining an even deeper cut. Russia's Ukrainian invasion didn't just eliminate €20 billion in exports overnight. It severed the energy artery keeping German factories alive. Before the war, Russian gas powered 55% of the steel mills, chemical plants, and assembly lines that generated Germany's wealth. When that supply collapsed by 90%, electricity prices exploded 35% in weeks. Manufacturers faced an impossible choice: shut down or go bankrupt trying to keep the lights on. The COVID shock alone might have been manageable, but it left Germany's economy vulnerable to an energy crisis that would prove far more devastating. The numbers tell a story of systematic unraveling. 2 straight years of recession, virtually unprecedented among developed economies. GDP hemorrhaging $200 billion, enough to fund Germany's entire healthcare system 6 times over. Unemployment surging past 3 million for the first time in decades. The cruel irony was that Germany's own rules prevented rescue. While America spent $5 trillion fighting COVID's economic damage, the debt brake meant Berlin couldn't deploy the fiscal stimulus that saved other nations. Germany had handcuffed itself to a sinking ship. Then America twisted the knife. Donald Trump's threatened 15% tariffs on German goods would vaporize another 20 billion euros from an economy already on life support. Particularly devastating given that America represents Germany's 3rd largest trading partner. Simultaneously, he demanded Germany quintuple defense spending to 5% of GDP, an impossibility given Berlin's fiscal straitjacket. Each external shock exposed how Germany's economic model, built for a stable world of open trade and cheap energy, was catastrophically unsuited to this new era of disruption. March 2025 marked Germany's Rubicon moment. The announcement of a 500 billion euro spending package shattered 7 decades of fiscal orthodoxy. Infrastructure would receive 300 billion euros, high-speed rail connecting industrial centers, broadband reaching forgotten towns, bridges that currently threaten to collapse finally getting repairs. Another 100 billion euros would transform Germany's energy landscape through the Climate and Transformation Fund, building offshore wind farms in the North Sea and quintupling solar capacity by 2030, breaking the stranglehold of imported fuel. The irony is striking. Germany's infrastructure, despite the nation's reputation for engineering excellence, ranks among Europe's worst. 36% of major bridges need urgent repair, one of the highest rates in Europe. Only 30% of Germans have broadband access, half the EU average. The country that perfected precision manufacturing let its own foundation crumble through decades of underinvestment, spending far less on infrastructure than comparable economies. Yet infrastructure spending carries unique risks in mature economies. Japan's post-war reconstruction delivered 9% annual growth because it built from nothing. Every new road multiplied productivity exponentially. Germany must improve what already exists, squeezing marginal gains from established systems. The Bundesbank admits these investments won't boost growth until 2027 at earliest, creating a dangerous gap between spending and returns. Meanwhile, debt service already consumes 40 billion euros annually, 8% of the federal budget, matching education spending. If interest rates rise just 2%, that burden increases by another 25 to 30 billion euros yearly. Germany's gamble transcends national borders because the entire European financial architecture rests on German stability. When Mediterranean economies wobble, and they frequently do, Berlin plays financial firefighter. Italian bonds plummet, German guarantees restore confidence. Greek banks teeter, German backing prevents collapse. Spanish debt spirals, German credibility calms markets. This unwritten insurance policy keeps European monetary union from fracturing. Investors don't really trust Rome or Athens. They trust that Berlin won't let them fail. Remove German credibility from this equation, and the mathematical elegance of European finance transforms into a house of cards. Already, warning signs emerge. Foreign investors are quietly reducing German bond holdings. Credit agencies mutter about downgrades, and long-term German bond yields have climbed to 40-year highs, approaching 3%. Each basis point matters. The difference between success and catastrophic failure might be measured in fractions of percentage points. The Climate and Transformation Fund represents Germany's boldest bet. 6 terawatt-hours of offshore wind capacity would power 1.6 million households annually. Solar generation quintupling by 2030 could finally normalize electricity prices that remain painfully elevated since Russia's gas disappeared. If successful, competitive energy costs might resurrect German manufacturing, particularly the energy-intensive chemical and steel industries that form the backbone of industrial production. If delayed or mismanaged, the debt burden could become crushing before benefits materialize. Germany's transformation hinges on execution speed, competing against market patience, a race where victory requires near perfection. Construction projects must avoid the delays and cost overruns that plague modern infrastructure everywhere. Bond markets must maintain faith long enough for productivity gains to emerge. Political consensus must survive inevitable setbacks and criticism. The margin for error is essentially zero. The precedents offer mixed signals. South Korea's infrastructure splurge in the 1990s created an export powerhouse, validating state-led investment. But Japan's repeated stimulus attempts since its 1990s crash produced only mounting debt and stagnation, suggesting limits to government intervention. Germany sits somewhere between, neither building from scratch like post-war Korea, nor demographically doomed like aging Japan, but facing its own unique combination of structural challenges and legacy strengths. What makes this moment historic extends beyond the money involved. Germany is attempting something previously unthinkable, transforming from Europe's austere banker into its biggest spender, from export dependency to domestic investment, from market orthodoxy to state intervention. It's not just changing policies, but abandoning the economic identity that defined post-war German success, the very philosophy that made German engineering and fiscal discipline synonymous with quality and reliability. This experiment will echo globally. If massive state investment can revitalize an advanced economy, expect governments worldwide to tear up balanced budget pledges. If Germany fails, the sermon of fiscal discipline gains new converts. Either outcome reshapes how we understand economic management in mature democracies, potentially ending or vindication the neoliberal consensus that has dominated policy since the 1980s. Consider the human dimension behind these trillion-euro figures. Those 60,000 Volkswagen workers in Wolfsburg aren't just statistics. They represent families whose mortgages depend on assembly lines keeping pace. The small manufacturers across Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg who supply components to global brands watch nervously as energy costs determine their survival. Entire communities built around industrial excellence face existential questions about their future. From Stuttgart's engineering firms to Hamburg's port workers, millions of Germans are betting their livelihoods on this gamble succeeding. The next 24 months will determine whether Germany's industrial model can evolve or must be abandoned. Whether the green transition becomes economic salvation or expensive virtue signaling. Whether Europe's anchor can hold or will drag the entire continental economy into deeper waters. The government's own projections show this is the inflection point. Without intervention, unemployment could exceed 5 million by 2026, while GDP remains mired in negative territory. Berlin has placed its bet. €500 billion says that government can still reshape economic destiny, that infrastructure investment can reignite growth, that breaking sacred rules sometimes represents wisdom rather than weakness. Models suggest this injection could return Germany to positive growth within 2 years, potentially creating 1 million new jobs and stabilizing tax revenues. But models aren't guarantees, and the space between projection and reality is where economic dreams go to die. The dice are rolling. The world watches. And in Wolfsburg tomorrow morning, 60,000 workers will stream through factory gates, wondering if they're walking toward Germany's future or its past. Their footsteps echo not just through factory floors, but through the corridors of power from Brussels to Beijing, where policymakers ask themselves, if Germany can't make this work, who can?